10 years ago, if you were a new artist or a new band, really the first step on the ladder was to get a record deal. Now, that's just an option.
You ever wonder why you can't just upload your music directly to Spotify or Apple Music? Well, this video will help us answer that question, but more importantly, it will prove that we are at the end of the evolution cycle for music platforms. And then I will wrap it up by showing you how AI is developing the next phase of this evolution. So stay tuned for the rest of this video so you can find out how crazy this is about to get. Before the digital age, you had to physically buy artists' record disc or CD player, or even way back with a Walkman cassette. Yes, music came out of this thing. I just lost somebody in Gen Z. I can feel it right now. The switch to digital should have been simple, but this one company called Napster might be the reason the music industry became filled with middlemen before sharing your music.
Napster really took hold in the public's consciousness, and the consumer realized that they could get the music that they wanted to hear for free.
It was on college campuses with high-speed internet that Napster really took off in the fall of '99.
So how many MP3s do you have on your computer?
About 600.
Maybe like 100 or something.
6,000 or 7,000.
Napster.
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 It's called file sharing, seen by some as the wave of the future.
It was very exciting. We knew we were building something that was going to be big.
Ladies and gentlemen, creator of Napster, Sean Fanning.
When I first heard about Napster, I recall my impression having two different elements. One being, this is incredible, it's revolutionary, and things will never be the same again in the music industry. And the other being, this is going to destroy the recording industry.
No longer do you have to go to a store and plunk down money.
And so, months after Napster's rise, the recording industry began a long legal battle to stop it.
They're waging a war in the courts over who controls what artists create.
We've heard that we couldn't survive before, when we had 700,000 members, and when we had 17 million members.
We felt pretty strongly that digital distribution was going to bring the industry closer to its customer, and instead of killing it, they would take advantage of the value that it brought.
But to record companies whose artists range from Tony Bennett to Metallica, this new technology in the wrong hands is simply stealing.
A business model built on infringement is not only morally wrong, but legally wrong.
At the time, the Recording Industry Association of America was reporting about $15 billion a year of revenue in the US alone.
Anybody with enough money could go and make a record. But that didn't guarantee you getting into stores, which was the only place that you could actually buy that record. That was the power of the music business, the distribution.
The issue made its way to Capitol Hill.
Napster hijacked our music without asking.
A chorus of studies show that Napster users buy more records as a result of using Napster.
Hank Barry, a lawyer, came on to act as CEO as the fight intensified.
We were trying to negotiate with the labels. We were trying to fight the court case, and we were trying to keep the system working all at the same time. We had a limited amount of time to make that happen, and we just didn't get that done within the period of time that we had.
The free music service run by Napster was ordered to stop the music.
In July of 2001, after more than a year of legal battles, the internet startup, which at its peak had about 70 million registered users, shut down its entire network in response to court orders.
We accurately estimated that the courts would say, you just don't have the right to give away all this stuff. And so we were perhaps a little smug and confident in the belief that, well, the courts would say it's not that and people would stop doing it. We didn't really factor in the consumer adoption, the youthful lack of respect for copyright, and the anonymity would combine to make it pretty unstoppable as a model.
As of today, there are 22 music platforms, but you've never heard of some of these. I mean, just look at this list. And let's be honest, we all know Spotify, and if you use an iPhone, you might be more inclined to Apple Music. And if you're a Gen Z, you discover music through TikTok. Yeah, we know. Now I'm gonna go off script here just a little bit because this requires some thought process. Spotify, for example, does something that a lot of platforms don't do, which is reveal the number of streams. Now this puts a lot of pressure on the platform, the artists, and the record label. If you're a major record label, you're releasing an artist a song on Spotify, you want the stream count to show the highest number possible when that song drops. Now you can see in that equation, there's some room for corruption. And guess what? It has been corrupted. Spotify has noticed that some artists have fake streams. And guess what? They do not shut it down. They say, as long as you don't go past 90% fake streams, your music is fine. Now, of course, we know why Spotify has made such a move, because this all comes down to the bottom line, the money. If I can profit from fake streams, then I can allow as many as I want up to a certain level. And if I need an artist to be popular, I just have to boost their streams up. Now, this doesn't happen for every artist. If you're an independent artist and you own all of your work and you try getting fake streams, this will happen to you.
Artists have to rely on constant touring to stay afloat, a prospect that was made even worse by the pandemic. And as the big record labels increase their control over Spotify, they're able to squeeze even more money from the platform. This money inevitably has to come from other groups' shares, with the artists taking the hardest hit to their bottom line. It's therefore no wonder that artists have vocally protested and boycotted Spotify numerous times over its lifespan. Now, one of the most recent boycotts was done by Neil Young, and while yes, this had to do a lot with Joe Rogan and his naughty words, it was also about Spotify's business model and the minuscule amount of royalties being paid to artists. And Neil Young wasn't the first. From Taylor Swift to the Beatles, lots of huge artists have tried to resist Spotify's dominance over the music industry. And yet despite this, all the artists that tried to boycott Spotify are now back on the platform. Even Neil Young, who was protesting Spotify just months ago, has now quietly rejoined the platform.
That whole idea of owning your own record and getting someone to market and distribute it for you is the biggest threat to traditional major record labels.
We need to rethink the music ecosystem and how we consume it. In the age where we can customize just about anything written in code, how will music fit into this box? How can you still enjoy your favorite artists, discover new ones, without the polluted platforms? The answer is direct to consumer. We need the new system to simply connect the artist to the listener. Sounds simple, right? We need to develop an AI ecosystem that's free, helps guide you through music you like, and even show you how it's made, and allow you to support your favorite artist directly. Perhaps they can even write a song suggested by you. Artists will still be relevant in the AI age. The access to their music will change, and should change.
Wixom Music Publishing sued Spotify in 2018 for infringing on the rights of their artists such as Neil Young and the Black Keys. This was only one record label, and they sued Spotify for $1.6 billion. Spotify settled for an undisclosed amount, which clearly shows how Spotify is at the mercy of these companies. And despite striking deals that are ludicrously lucrative for them, the record labels always want more. Of course, all these lawsuits are disguised as being for the artist's benefits. But then who are these mysterious people? Who are these greedy, ruthless companies demanding more and more? Well, to really understand the problem with Spotify, we need to have a closer look at who's pulling the strings. You see, back in 2015, Spotify sought to secure another $500 million of investments to delay going public, all because of the looming threats of lawsuits. Usually when companies do this, they refer themselves to a third party that can broker a deal with other investors.
Between you and your favorite song, there's at least about 2 or more middlemen, the record label and the platforms. Those are 2 obvious ones that you know. Those platforms were tools created to control the flood that became streaming online. And they did just that until record labels purchased stake in them. When you start funding companies that are meant to regulate you, the corruption door swings wide open. AI generated music will provide the reset.
In fact, CEO Daniel Ek is positioning himself to be on top of the AI industry, with Daniel Ek announcing that his investment company Prima Materia was going to be donating $150 million to a military defense contractor named Helsing, a military contractor that also specializes in artificial intelligence. Helsing is, in their own words, a new type of artificial intelligence company focused on defense and security. Defense may seem a surprising investment for us, but we share Helsing's conviction that liberal democratic values are worth defending and that artificial intelligence will be an essential capability to keep us safe. And this software is crazy advanced. This is AI that gathers data from multiple sensors on vehicles and systems to help people process complex and diverse information more reliably and act quickly. Using the secrets of this AI technology and Spotify's music could cause a wave in the music industry. However, Spotify won't just be making money through its artificial songs. Spotify is adopting all of the Netflix business model. They won't just create their own music, they're now starting to license their own exclusive content.
The biggest example of this was the $100 million deal between Spotify and Joe Rogan.
In May of 2020, Joe Rogan signed a licensing agreement with Spotify to be the exclusive platform for his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience. Back then, Joe's podcast was a great way to hear about people, niches, and opinions never spoken about before. The long-form style podcast gave voices and opinions that the mainstream ignored. With Joe Rogan's popularity inching every year, his podcast would then be littered with celebrity appearances, which skyrocketed his show to new heights. And by 2017, Joe Rogan was the #1 international podcaster. And yet Joe Rogan's show was completely free on YouTube. With such a loyal fanbase, this was the perfect content to bring in new users to Spotify. And so in 2021, Joe Rogan received $100 million to make his show for Spotify members only. However, with these big investors breathing down Spotify's neck, it would mean that Joe Rogan, a man known for his freedom-loving libertarian roots, would be forced into self-censorship. Since Joe Rogan moved to Spotify, his show has openly been censored on the platform, with Spotify's team reviewing thousands of his podcasts to remove all content that didn't fit their investors' beliefs. Or more importantly, what increases Spotify's ESG score, which is why the company would have to remove 75 Joe Rogan podcasts. But because Spotify was so desperate for their investors, they couldn't handle lowering Spotify's special ESG rating score. Little did they know, Joe Rogan would be hit by a cancel culture wave. In October 2021, Joe Rogan had a conversation with CNN's in-house medical advisor, Sanjay Gupta, because a few days prior, Rogan had contracted COVID-19 and was prescribed ivermectin. A CNN report would later air shortly after Rogan's Instagram post regarding his medical condition and condemning Rogan for taking and promoting a horse dewormer.
One of those drugs he mentioned, ivermectin, is something more often used to deworm horses.
As such, Rogan condemned Gupta of lying for his news company and misrepresenting medical options for those with COVID-19. Joe Rogan then also added that he believed that vaccination should be optional. Because of this, Joe Rogan would obviously be lampooned by the mainstream media, frequently accused of spreading false information, with all of this heat coming to a clash on December 30th, when Joe Rogan would have an interview with Dr. Robert Malone. On this episode, Dr. Malone, one of the developers of the mRNA vaccines, would go on to compare the lockdown, mask mandates, and mandatory vaccinations as mass formation psychosis. As the clips of this portion of Rogan's podcast surfaced on YouTube, a real mass psychosis occurred, and many wanted to have Rogan burned at the stake, with Rogan being demonized as a menace to public health, and an open letter was sent to Spotify signed by 270 US healthcare officials asking for the platform to censor Rogan's podcast. Then following this scandal, boomer corporate rock icon Neil Young threatened Spotify if they didn't remove the Joe Rogan Experience from the platform. If they didn't remove his content, he would remove his music. And so in January 2022, he actually did, along with other boomer artists such as Bruce Springsteen. Even though these artists would eventually crawl back, Spotify would go on to censor episodes and add content advisory panels to all content discussing these controversial topics. Or in other words, if Spotify actually did allow freedom of content on the platform, then investors would give Spotify a bad investment score, meaning that current and new investors would be more likely to pull out of Spotify and put Spotify on the verge of bankruptcy. But while licensing and making their own content was one way of making money, it still wasn't enough for Spotify to retain its dominance. Instead, the real money for Spotify came, like with all social media apps, from selling user data. We can see this in the book Spotify Teardown Inside the Black Box of Streaming Music. It was a book written by a group of 5 academics who spent years studying the service. Spotify, they argue, exists at the confluence of industries such as music, advertising, technology, and finance, rather than just being an independent player with the potential to shape the future of the music business. In the book, they describe how by using your emotions, playlists, and in-app behavior, Spotify sells your emotional response data to advertisers.
As more and more begin to create music, they will run into the corrupted system of getting music to platforms. This discovery is what eventually will bring companies like Spotify and Apple Music down to their knees.
Tech startup called Cobalt, and they're using the same digital revolution to rewrite the rules.
I have never liked bullies. I don't see why bullies should walk around and make other people's lives bad.
We're taking on the big boys. And we've said to people, you can be the masters of your own destiny.
Across the world, old industries are facing disruption on an unprecedented scale.
People are not taking our taxes.
Confronted by ever-changing technology, the pressure to adapt has never been greater.
It is always survival of the fittest. That's capitalism.
Because where there's threat, there's also opportunity.
Now, I'm not hating on Spotify, I just don't believe we need 3 middlemen before supplying fans with the music they want to hear. As of today, Spotify will charge you a $10 fee if 90% of your streams are fake. 89% of your streams are okay, but if you cross that 90% threshold, you will get fined and then your music will eventually get kicked out. The system is corrupted. We are at the end of music platforms in this evolution cycles, and a new dawn is upon us. You can always tell because more and more corruption is revealed and artists start to realize that they never needed them in the first place. Now, if you're an artist or someone interested in sharing your music with people who might enjoy it or sharing your craft or videos, you should not only be compensated for that, but you should also be free to share your music directly to the people that want it. There are so many ways you can accomplish it today, and it will only become easier as the current ecosystems continue to crumble from within.
As more bands choose to control their own careers, this poses a challenge the major labels can't afford to ignore.
I think we've had to recognize that to get to progress and to continue to have a place in the ecosystem of music going forward and to be able to continue doing what we do, we've needed to take a good long hard look at ourselves and kind of evolve.
They're now investing in not just the artists, but also the platforms on which their music is played. Some sources claim that together they own nearly 20% of streaming subscription service Spotify, a stake that's estimated to be worth at least $1.5 billion. And they've also acknowledged that they no longer hold all the cards when dealing with talent.
Part of what's happened is we've become much more service-oriented in our mentality, thinking a lot more about what specific set of needs does this particular artist require to commercialize their art.
You don't need to give away your rights to earn your money. In fact, you'll earn more money if you don't give away your rights.
Now, if you enjoy these videos, feel free to do the thing that does that thing that help you find more of these. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Deuces.